thank you all for joining us here this afternoon. Very excited. Today's presentation is called Rediscover the Lost Art of Conversation. With our increasing dependence on quick texts and emails, we are losing the art of making conversation. This presentation will provide helpful networking tips to job seekers, including how to build conversations with confidence, how to start, maintain, and wrap up a conversation, and solutions to common conversation quandaries. And anyone who knows me, Janet, knows I'm a very awkward conversationalist. So I'm going to be taking lots of notes for this one. People who cringe at networking or making small talk with strangers will find this hour beneficial. And so today's presentation is led by Janet Parnes, who's a social conversation and etiquette expert who equips people with the skills to make them feel valued, understood, and heard in order to help them build their careers and businesses. Prior to starting her own business in 2005 and graduating from the Protocol School of Washington, Janet spent more than 20 years in sales and public relations, working for companies that include Analog Devices, Lipton Tea, and international public relations agency Porter Novelli. And again, this presentation is sponsored by the Friends of the Tewksbury Library. So all 50 of us or so, let's give a big virtual round of applause for Janet for joining us here today. And Janet, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to welcome all of you with a question. Do you find yourself doing a lot of talking to further your business or career, but it's not getting you very far? You're doing a lot of talking, but not doing a lot of walking. You go to networking meetings when you could, or maybe you network online now and or have one-on-ones, and you just end up saying, why do I even bother? You're spending a lot of time, and there is no time to waste. I'm here to tell you that there are very simple, concrete techniques that you can apply to your conversations so that to build relationships that will help you move forward. My name is Janet Parnes. I've been bringing my social conversation and etiquette events to clients of various ages, from small to tall, for about 15 years. Since 2012, I've focused on college students and professionals. So whether my clients are learning how to establish relationships at a business dinner, in a cubicle or a meeting, or in a networking meeting, they're all learning. Ooh, hold on. This does not want to move forward. Why does this one move forward? They're all learning how to generate likability and trust. You're probably all familiar with this quote. It's a very famous quote. There's a problem with it, though. To really like somebody and trust somebody enough to do business with them can take time. Well, maybe not if you're selling, if you're selling ice cream scoops, maybe not. But if you're selling a piece of property or something, you're taking someone's finances into your hands, it can take them a while to trust you enough to turn all that over to you. And all that allows time for the competition to enter in. So what we need to do to speed up the process is make others feel valued, understood, and heard. When people feel valued, understood, and heard, they tend to like us and trust us enough to do business with us and to hire us as well. Companies and organizations like to hire those they like and trust. So everything I talk about today will boil down to generating likability and trust. And as Robert said, I will post your questions in the chat. At the end of the presentation, I will address them. And at the end of the presentation, I'll give you the opportunity to raise your hand and ask your question verbally or make a comment. So I hope we have a little bit of back and forth at the end. So let's move on here. When we learn to drive a car, we have to learn how to apply the brake and turn on the blinker, but we also have to develop skills such as developing an awareness of that which is going on around us. It's the same with conversation. There are certain skills we need to develop. Associated with each skill are very concrete techniques. These are some of the skills we need to develop. We'll address the associated techniques in the skills that are in blue. So today you'll learn generally how to initiate a conversation, keep it going, end a conversation in a way that makes you memorable, and then navigate through some common conversation quandaries. All right, so let's get started. one of the fundamental practices of making someone feel valued, understood, and heard is to listen to them. We, as human beings, we have an innate need to be acknowledged, we crave the attention of other people. So listening is a very powerful way to generate likability and trust, to make someone feel valued, understood, and heard. There are impediments, though, to listening, such as this, the forgetful factor. When we speak to someone, they forget 50% of what we said in the first hour. They forget 75% of what we said in a day. In a week, they've forgotten most of what we've told them. So you might look at this and think, why bother to open my mouth? However, let's look at it from another perspective. If people are forgetting most of what we say in a week, are we forgetting most of what they say? How can we make someone feel valued, understood, and heard if we forget most of what they tell us? We've essentially forgotten them. So let's see what we can do to ratchet up our listening skills. In the United States, you hear parents tell their children, put on your listening ears. In China, people might say, put on your listening ears, listening eyes, and listening heart. So when we listen, we hear words with our ears, we hear words. What do we, quote, hear when we listen with our eyes? What, if you post in the chat? We hear. Oh, I have to put my glasses on to read this.
Well, I'm scarfing down a salad wrap, but I think Michael got the right answer. Body language, nonverbal.
Yes. Yes, we hear people's, we quote hear people's gestures, and we also hear, quote hear their facial expressions. And sometimes the words they use and their facial expressions or gestures do not match. When we listen with our heart, what do we quote hear? If you post in the chat, please. Emotion, yes. Inflection, responsiveness, yes. Inflection, truth, passion, excitement, yes. We hear emotion. So when we listen with our ears we hear words, we tune into gestures and body language, and we tune into emotion. That's the recipe for giving undivided attention. That's the recipe for making someone feel valued, understood, and heard, to generate likability and trust and build relationships. Okay. Let's take an example of this. You can see that Dave is nervous about a meeting with client W the next day. He's confiding in Sophie. Sophie has 3 possible responses. Which of these responses is going to make Dave feel valued, understood, and heard? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? Let's see. Which do you think will make him feel valued, understood, and heard? 1, 2, or 3? 3, yes. Yes, 3 is the right answer. 2 is not bad. I don't think anybody posted 1, which is not the right answer, actually. That would make him feel the least valued, understood, and heard. So 2s and 3s. So let's look at number 1. For obvious reasons, this is not going to make Dave feel too great about Sophie. It's really brushing aside his feelings. And it also can be seen as condescending. You aren't capable of doing this, I am. So that's the totally wrong answer. Number 2, Dave has keyed into Sophie has keyed into Dave's words, but not his emotion. Number 3, Sophie gets it. Sophie's keyed into his words, his emotion, and she's thinking, what can I do to allay your fears? So when Dave has answer number 3, he thinks she values my position, she's hearing me, and she's understanding what I'm saying. She gets me. Again, we're inclined to like and trust those who make us feel valued, understood, and heard. I love this quote. Interestingly, and you could say, well, job, interview, relationship, you could substitute job for many other words for job. Interestingly, President Coolidge, or Silent Cal, was president during the Roaring 20s. He was not roaring. Let's talk now about launching a conversation. We're not going to be launching a conversation with questions with as much gusto as you see in the photo, but it will take off in a quieter way. Often the way to start off a conversation with someone we don't know or we don't know well is to engage in small talk. Small talk is light, easy conversation. In many cases, it's fluff stuff. The purpose of small talk is to put both parties at ease, and we do that by establishing common ground. Small talk is very often a portal we walk through in order to engage in more meaningful conversation. Put both parties at ease, and the conversation becomes easier. And we build a little bit of trust and ease with each other. So how do you do that? Well, in our culture, we'll often start off by this question: how are you? Now, the person may dutifully respond, fine, thank you. This, however, is what that person is likely feeling. You haven't given them any kind of a launch pad from which to send a response. The universe of possible answers is so large, it's hard to focus on any one. She knows you don't want to hear about her appendectomy that went bad, nor the argument she had with her second cousin twice removed. So she's thinking, what do I say? We want to give others some kind of a launch pad, and these are a couple of suggestions. Occupation. People generally speak very easily about their occupation. It's familiar to them, and if they like what they do, it's enjoyable for them. So I used to ask, so what do you do? I asked that question until I gave a workshop very similar to this at the Carroll School for the Blind. There was a man there who was in his mid-50s, and he had lost his sight, of course. He had been an engineer. He said, when I go to networking meetings, people say, what do you do? And I have to tell them, well, I used to be an engineer, but I've lost my sight. So now I'm looking for a new career. And he said, I can just feel my inside slump as I say this. So I asked him this: what would you rather people say? He said, if people say, what brings you here? That gives me an opportunity to say, oh, I've come to meet people. I want to find out what they're doing for work, what they like about it, what they don't. I want to find out about their career journey. He said, and then I can more easily segue into the fact that I've lost my sight and I'm looking for a new career. So of course, ever since that conversation, I've switched from what do you do to what brings you here. Another topic is recreation. And of course, there are many, 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 there's chess, there's tennis, there's all kinds of possibilities here. If you don't, and offer something about yourself, you might say, oh, I like to play pickleball, and what do you like to do in your spare time? So when we offer something about ourselves, it makes people feel freer to share about themselves. They tend to feel more at ease, particularly if someone is introverted. So offer something, oh, I like to play pickleball. What do you like to do in your spare time? Maybe they don't know anything about pickleball. What if someone said to you, I like to play pickleball, and you don't play pickleball, you know nothing about pickleball. What could you say to establish common ground, to keep the conversation going? If you posted the chat. And there are many answers to this. How is it played? Yes. How is it played? Ask a question. We'll get into that a little bit later on. I've heard it's a lot of fun. How do you play? Yes. Ask questions. That it makes it so much easier, because if you don't respond and the person has to come up with another topic, and if you're the speaker and that you say, I like to play pickleball, and they say, well, I don't play, and you've got to come up with something else. It just ask questions. It's always a way to keep a conversation going. It shows interest. We'll go into that a little bit later on. Also, when you ask a question, it helps create that common ground. You're both talking about pickleball. You want to make this as easy as possible on both parties. It is enjoyable. Let's see. Oh, wait a minute, I'm going the wrong way here. Okay. There are also ways to spice up your conversations in order to generate that likability and trust, make people feel valued, understood, and heard. There are a couple of ways to do that. When people are speaking, I say, pick up a tributary. There's a main flow, But as people speak, there are always ways to pick up on the conversation, take it in a slightly different direction to keep it going. So for example, you might be talking about the wildfires, as that might be your small talk topic. So the person's talking about the wildfires in Oregon. And from there, you could maybe pick up by saying, oh, have you ever been to Oregon? I've been, and talking about the coast of Oregon. So you can take it into different directions. Have you ever been into the Cascades? I hear there's a lot of rain in the Cascades. Again, find the little tributaries you can follow so you don't hit dead ends. Also be curious. So when I'm talking about closed-ended questions, usually when you ask a closed-ended question, how many words does it take to respond? If you ask someone a closed-ended question, they will generally respond in how many words? 1, yes. 1, yes. And then you hit a brick wall. Oh, so someone asks you a question, you respond. So generally you respond with one word, and the person, oh my God, I have to come up with another one. I have to come up with another question. Closed-ended questions often start with are you going away on vacation? Yes, person answers. When are you going on vacation? December 2nd. Who are you going on vacation with? My wife, my husband. And then it's, okay, I've got to keep this going somehow. Open-ended questions generally begin with how or what. So how are you spending your vacation this year? What are you going to be doing over the holiday? It forces the person to answer in more than 1 or 2 words. And what that does is it gives you the tributaries you can pick up on to keep the conversation going. So using open-ended questions in a conversation, it makes it easier on everybody, including you. Another technique for making others feel valued, understood, and heard, and putting them at ease is to repeat something that someone said. Generally, keep it to a few words. We're going to keep it short, and we want to choose something that resonates with the person. So let's take an example here. Emily says, despite the downturn, we went from 6 employees to 300 in 3 years. That's quite a growth, huh? Growth spurt. So Tom responds, from 6 employees to 300 in 3 years. He takes exactly what Emily has said and repeats it. Oh, he says it with a lot more passion than I did. From 6 employees to 300 in 3 years. So how does that make Emily feel? Terrific, accomplished, excited about the growth. Yeah, excited, validated, valued, and heard. Yes, all of those are correct answers. And I see, oh, wait a minute. Let me get rid of this for a minute. No, wait. And what Tom repeated, the phrase that would resonate with Emily. He didn't say, oh, the downturn. He said, you went from 6 employees to 300 in 3 years. That validates Emily. That excites Emily. That makes Emily, as you have said, that makes Emily feel heard. Someone also a couple of points in the chat about, let's go back here, the open-ended questions. Why is also a starter for an open-ended question. Why, however, this is a bit nitpicky, but why can make someone feel as if they're on the hot seat. Why did you? It can and maybe instead of why, how did you come to? Or what was the reason you did? So why is not wrong. Just keep in mind it can be a bit jarring. Okay, so Emily feels heard. Emily feels validated and heard. The next technique for making others feel valued, understood, and heard is to pause. Now, in our culture, we don't like pauses. We think something always has to be happening. We think there's something wrong when there's a pause. It's not that way in other cultures. In ours, it is. Pauses also, although, are very powerful tools for elevating the quality of a conversation. As a speaker, when we pause, it gives us time to organize our thoughts. If you tend to be someone who speaks quickly, pausing will slow you down. If you're someone who uses a lot of fillers, pauses will help mitigate that. So as a listener, when the speaker pauses, it gives the listener time to digest and reflect. So overall, the conversation becomes more coherent and it elevates the quality of a conversation. Now, pausing also is a way to redirect the attention of someone who's strayed. So if you're talking with someone and you see suddenly they're looking in another direction, just stop talking. Think about this. You were in the seventh grade. The teacher's up the front of the room waxing eloquently about the War of 1812. What's half the class doing? They're knocking elbows, they're whispering, they're passing notes around. What did a good teacher do as opposed to yell? What did he or she do as an alternative to yelling? They stopped talking. And I see there's really as far as the previous slide about Tom's response to Emily's 600 to 300 employees in years. I see you focused on the positive, which is true too. And Emily felt listened to. Good. So back to this, I digressed for a moment. So a good teacher just stopped talking. What did the kids do? Head snapped up, because you see, if nothing's happening, something must be happening. So take that into a situation where you're speaking with someone and their attention strays. Just stop talking for a moment. In general, they will come back to you. You won't have to say a word. So this begs the question, of course, when do you pause? Well, I spoke to a colleague who's a speech pathologist. She said, oh, it's simple. You pause at the sentence ends and pause at the commas. So you see, we don't have to plan our pauses. We just have to let them naturally happen. And it becomes habitual after a while. It's actually quite pleasant. So you've started off a conversation with small talk. You found a topic that you've established common ground. You found a topic of mutual interest. You keep the conversation going by picking up tributaries. You make the other person feel valued, understood, and heard by repeating something they said. You've kept their attention by inserting pauses. You've done all of that. You've had a lovely conversation. Now it's time to wrap it up. The traditional way to wrap up a conversation goes something like this. You extend your hand. It's been nice meeting you. I hope our paths cross again. Compare that with this. I never thought of a dentist streaming a meditation, not only to calm down a nervous patient, but to calm down themselves. This has been fascinating. I hope our paths cross again. So which situation or scenario, number one or number two, is going to make the other person feel valued, understood, and heard? Remember, we were talking about this during the conversation. The person was telling me about dentist. She was a dentist, actually. She was telling me how she'll download a tape and run a tape to calm herself down. So by ending and bringing that up at the end, which scenario is going to make her feel valued, understood, and heard? Simply, I hope our paths cross again, nice meeting you, or repeating something she said. This is a no-brainer. Number two, it would be number two. So you do want to mention something the person said, and certainly do say it's been fun speaking with you. And in this case, I said it's been fascinating speaking with you. You certainly want to enter something positive, but take that traditional wrap up and tack on something that references something that they said. Mention something they said. Again, it's about making someone feel valued, understood, and certainly heard. And that actually was a real conversation. I was talking to a dentist. She was talking about running a meditation. She said, when a patient's nervous, I'm nervous. It calms the patient, but it also calms me. Okay, now we have quandaries. No matter how silvery our tongue may be, we always end up in conversation quandaries. Here are a few on how to navigate your way through them. You're running on empty. You're speaking to someone, all of a sudden the topic is tapped out. You don't know what to say, and you're standing there smiling at each other. So rather than try and think of some detail of what they said to address, which you can't do because you're probably feeling rather nervous, make the questions more generic and general. How did you come to move to Florida? How did you come, tell me more about your journey from carpenter to journalist. You can talk about, if you're in a venue, you can talk about something about the venue. Maybe it's a picture on the wall. Maybe if you're in an interview, it might be an award you read about. Bring that up, or something that you saw in the waiting room. You can pay somebody a compliment. Just make sure it's sincere. And men usually, it's probably not wise to compliment a woman on her appearance, find something else. But these are just, and you can, if you come in with some of these in your quiver, these ideas in your quiver, you'll be able to draw them out during your conversation. How did you come to tell me more about something about the venue? How was the buffet? How did you find the buffet? Or a compliment. And remember, it's okay to pause. It's okay to take a few seconds to think if we don't have something to say. Pauses, which often seem to us to be an eternity, are really but a couple of seconds, and the other person experiences it that way. It's just a quick interlude. The point is to not get nervous. You're talking to someone who just doesn't stop. Anybody ever experienced this? We all have. Generally, everybody has to breathe. Take a moment that person takes a breath and bring them back on point. This can often be done with a question. One time I was in a Toastmasters meeting. There was a competition that was to take place the next week. So one of the members in leadership was visiting the different groups and talking about how to prepare for the competition. Well, the gentleman that addressed our group came and he started talking, and he talked and he talked and he talked. 30 minutes later, he still had not told us how to prepare for the competition. He took a breath. A woman in the group said, "Could you please tell us how we prepare for the competition?" And I remember his response. He went, "Oh my gosh, I haven't even addressed that." You could feel him talking to himself. "Oh my gosh, I haven't even addressed that yet." She brought him back on point. He took him about 10 minutes to tell us how to prepare for the competition, but the talk took 40. So she was just very matter of fact and very politely said, "Could you please tell us how to prepare for the competition?" So generally asking a question, bring them back on point. You may say something like, tell me more about, and bring them back on point. Could you expound on, bring them back on point? Some way to bring them back on point. If they can't stay and they continue to ramble, you just wrap up the conversation. Mention something they said to wrap up the conversation. Interruptions. With an interruption, we have to decide whether to hand over the conversation or handle the interruption. In the case of which you're being interviewed, the interviewer is a bit of an interrupter, or you're an employee and someone 3 levels ahead of you is interrupting, you may decide to hand over the conversation. However, if that's not the case, you decide to address it, make eye contact with the person, let them know you'd like to address their point, but you haven't finished yet. So in this way, you're telling the person, "I haven't finished yet, let me finish." You're also saying, though, I value what you have to say. So it ends on a pretty positive note. Okay. The other thing you can do, particularly if you know you're going to be interrupted, is to be proactive. Give the listener a little preview of what you're going to say. For example, I have 3 points to make. I'm going to make these 3 points. That way the person knows if you're only on point 2, they may think, okay, she's not finished. Sometimes people interrupt because they actually think you're finished. You may take a bit of a pause and they jump in. If they know you have 3 points to make and you've only made 2, they're less likely to interrupt. Or another example might be, I'm going to be talking about XYZ. It's going to take me a minute to do that. So people know it's not going to be a quick answer. We can also be the offenders. This is such a common mistake. And I think we've all made it. I know I make it. It's stealing the spotlight. Someone mentions, I took the family to Disney World. Oh, and you respond, oh, I went to Disney World last year, And all of a sudden you're talking about your trip to Disney World. And how does that person feel? The spotlight's been stolen. It's easy to do for these reasons. We like talking about ourselves. We like talking about ourselves even when there's nobody listening. So we have to be very careful to give the other person time in the spotlight. This is an example. Joe, Fran is speaking. She has the stage. Joe takes it out from under her feet. He takes the spotlight and redirects it to him. It may not be intentional, but that's the effect. There are people who say, I like to respond with something that in my life because I feel it relates to the person. There's validity in that. However, we have to give the person the time in the spotlight, then offer something about ourselves. I remember I had a one-on-one with someone some years ago. She handed me this brochure, this huge brochure stuffed with 1 billion pamphlets, and started talking about her products. Clearly it was a pitch. I tried waiting until she took a breath. I let her speak for a while, waited until she took a breath and tried introducing myself, but she didn't listen. It was like an elastic band that kept snapping back to her, back to her, back to her. So after a while I realized she doesn't want to hear what I have to say. She doesn't want to hear about me. So I wrapped up the conversation. She wasn't really, we have to give someone their time in the sun. I'm not sure if that was an appropriate example. We have to give someone the time in the sun. She should have given me my time in the sun. I tried to take the spotlight, but she wouldn't give it to me. Okay, so let's go into here. Delivering bad news. We all have to do that at some point in time. Every once in a while, when we deliver bad news, we want it to have an impact. We want it to hit home. Most of the time, we don't. Most of the time, we want to toss the person a frisbee, not a hard ball. This is the way to do it. We make a bad news sandwich. So you offer a piece of good news, a piece of bad news, and then another piece of good news. This way, the conversation begins and ends on a positive note. Let's look at this example. Do you have any training in customer service? The good news is you do have a history of working with customers, but in an informal sense. That's the bad news. You haven't been formally trained. And then you end with another piece of good news. So this way, the person ends up feeling good at the beginning. They end up feeling good at the end. It softens the bad news. So what have we talked about here? We've talked about pausing. We've talked about small talk. We've talked about conversation quandaries, the interrupter. We've talked about how to start, maintain, and end up a conversation. So if you take any of the techniques we've talked about, for example, if you pause at the commas, let's say you start doing that. Let's say you open up a conversation by talking about recreation, one of your hobbies. Let's say you have to deliver bad news. You sandwich it between two pieces of good news or an interrupter. You take a breath and you state, I'd love to hear what you have to say, but I haven't finished yet. Let's say you take any one or two of those things. Are you going to be an icon of the conversationalist, of the perfect conversationalist overnight? No. Are you going to, at any one or two of those, are you going to generate these really strong bonds of likability and trust overnight? No. It's the compilation of details that make the difference. Just as in a room, we've all heard it's the details that make the room. It's the details that give a room its personality, its presence. It's these details in a conversation that allow you to build a relationship and generate likability and trust. You can see Arthur Conan Doyle actually gets this. So what do you have to do to create these conversations? This is my recommendation. Clarify, communicate, and then connect. Sounds simple. So you can do that. There are myriad web pages that address this relationship building, almost as many books. So you can search the web, you can read, you can go to webinars and seminars, all these things that I've done, and you could create a program for yourself and start implementing the protocols. However, if you have other things to do, and going through all of this research and putting together a program is going to mean just slogging through, you might consider another option. I'm offering a 25-minute free call. We can talk about your goals, the challenges that are impeding you from meeting your goals, and then some support options. The support option, it may come through me. The support may come through somebody else. However, by the end of the conversation, you'll have a way to move forward, some options for moving forward. So if you'd like to schedule a complimentary conversation, this is my calendar URL. And I will post this in the chat. These are the other topics that I address, other programs that I have in my business. It's all about it's really about establishing relationships and developing professional presence. So it's really when we make others feel valued, understood, and heard, we generate that likability and trust and create those connections that can move us towards our goals. I do offer every other week free etiquette tip. It's normally around some aspect of professional etiquette. I call it Manners in a Minute because you can read it in a minute. It's one quick tip. If you'd like to receive the tip, the every other week tip, you can either go to my website or you can put your email address in the chat and just put CONV so I know this relates to the conversation. It relates to the tip. So you just put your email and then in either tip or CONV. So I thank you for your attention. And now I think it's time we address some questions.
So folks, if you have questions, initially we can type them into the chat. And then if we're not getting too many chat questions, as Janet said, we can kind of then open it up to audio and video questions. We did have a question from Mike a few minutes ago. He'd like to know, what do you do about people that don't hear the bad news, only the good news? You talked about a bad news sandwich, good news, bad news, good news. What if there's people out there that fail to hear the bad news? Mike, that's an interesting point. I was at a talk some time ago. The speaker actually addressed that. He said, I used to conduct reviews by giving the good news, the bad news, and then the good news. People were forgetting the bad news. So he said, what I do now is I just go with the bad news. If someone isn't hearing the good news, is not hearing the bad news, you have to isolate it. It doesn't, and it may be good, you offer the good news at another time. For example, if you're an employer, you might compliment the person at other times. But if they're not hearing the bad news, you have to take away the good news and strip it down. You touched on this briefly when you talked about Ramblers, but Diane would like to know, what do you do when people never stop talking? I feel so seen, Diane. I think Diane's talking about me.
Not at all, Robert. Not at all. But it's that everybody has to breathe. Wait till they take a breath and ask and insert something about yourself. Don't ask a question of them because they'll just keep on talking, but insert something about yourself. It might be something they said that you could relate to. That would be the best way to do this. If in their conversation, they're talking about making widgets and you've made widgets. Oh, I've made widgets, da, da, da. So you can kind of bridge over to yourself. If, however, as in my situation, the person kept bringing the conversation back to themselves and continued to ramble, you're wasting your time. Just wrap up the conversation.
Susan asks, on interviews, it seems they are often trying to disqualify you. How do you turn this around?
They're often trying to disqualify you.
I think she means they're trying to find something out about you that would eliminate you from the process.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what she means.
Negative points, she says. Negative points.
There's such a thing as turning a negative. I don't say it's turning a negative into a positive. For example, when someone says, "What are your weaknesses?" and I tend to, you tend to be late. I tend to be late. This is what I'm doing about it. So if they're trying to find your weaknesses, see if you can turn them into, at least neutralize them by offering, this is what I'm doing about it. This is what I have done about it. And these are the results. I know that can be difficult if a person's uncovering something and you're not prepared for it. However, before going into an interview, if you know your weaknesses, or that which could be perceived as weaknesses because of the particular job for which you're interviewing, see if you can come up with something to counter it.
Great. So at this point, I don't see any questions remaining in the chat. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question of Janet, you can do that now. And we'll still take chat questions if anyone wants to submit one, but we'll also open it up to anyone who wants to ask a video question. Uh-oh, Janet, here's that awkward silence that we're trying to avoid.
It is, and I'm not getting nervous. I'm just, everybody needs a little bit of time to think.
There you go. We are getting a lot of emails in the chat though, so I will email addresses. I'll make sure to save the chat, Janet, for you.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
Great.
Perfect.
We'll give folks another 30 seconds or so, to think of a question, and if not, we can move on.
Yeah.
Janet, do you have a position when it comes to business cards or name tags, any sort of preferences there? I mean, I imagine of course, things are different now with COVID. And I guess the governor has just, as we were meeting, just put on further restrictions. But what should someone's name tag look like, or what should someone's business card look like? Any suggestions there?
Well, the business cards should be obviously professional looking and not so busy that someone can't read them. When we hand someone when we hand someone a business card, we want them to be able to see something about us to stand out. So we don't want to put so much information on the front of the card that nothing stands out. In addition, when you hand someone a business card, always hand it so that they can hand it so it's oriented in a way that they can look down and read it. It's not, the writing isn't upside down. You want it to be upside down to you, but right side to them, so they can easily read it. And always offer a business card with your right hand. The name tag also, because we'll all be networking again in person. The name tag should always be on your left. Many of us are right-handed, so we tend to put it on the right. It should be on the left. There's a reason for this. When we're shaking hands with someone, their line of sight is to our left shoulder. So if for some reason you say your name and they forget or they have trouble with it, they can easily see the name tag without having to turn their head. I see lots of name tags on the right because it's habit if we're right-handed. And I do see.
We just had about 5 questions pop up. So Diane wants to know, where do you position yourself when you walk into a room? Let's say you're going to a big networking event.
Diane, when you enter a room, stand to the right. Go through the door and stand to the right. Then take a look around the room. Stand up. And when we enter a networking room, it can be a bit daunting if there are 100 people in the room, and it can make us feel small. Stand straight. I say stand tall, and that has no relation to height. It's just stand straight. It's part of it's called the power pose. When we think that our bodies react to the brain says stand straight, so we stand straight. That is true. However, the brain also reacts to gestures. So by standing straight, it sends a message back to the brain of confidence and power. So stand straight and take a minute to look around the room, but stand to the right of the door.
Great question from Nancy. What are your thoughts on how to respond to inappropriate questions or comments?
There are several ways to respond to that. You can either ignore it and bring up another subject, bridge on to another subject. If that doesn't work, you can say let's change the subject. But obviously, you do not have to respond to an inappropriate question it's kind of denigrated by, you'd be kind of denigrating yourself. So either bridge over to something else or just bring up another subject. And if you must, be very blunt. This isn't something I'm comfortable talking about.
Janice has a question. What is the best way to approach a group of people already talking?
Okay. Probably, let me see, probably exactly what you would think. You stand to the outside of the group and try and catch somebody's eye. At a networking meeting, this is expected. You're not crashing the group. It's expected that new people come and enter groups. So stand to the outside of the group, try and catch someone's eye. They'll normally invite you in. As if you are part of a group, leave a little bit of a space so that someone can enter a group, and it doesn't require everybody to shift positions. If you're standing to the outside of a group and after 30 seconds, 20 seconds, no, you don't catch anybody's eye, move on. It may well mean that they're engrossed in conversation and they don't want anybody to enter. This leads to the suggestion to only enter a group of 3 or more people. And oftentimes a group of 2, the people are pretty deeply engrossed in conversation. It may be more of an intrusion to try and enter. But just stand to the outside of the group and catch somebody's eye. Normally people invite you in.
Mike wants to know, what is your favorite question to ask someone about themselves?
Oh, at a networking meeting, what brings you here? That truly is. It's easy. I don't have to try and come up. What do I know about this person? What can I see about this person? It's a really easy question for me to ask. I ask that often. What brings you here? As far as once I've been in conversation with someone and I want to know more about them, I like to ask them, what do you do for fun? Lighten up the conversation a little bit. When people talk about fun, it's easy for them to talk.
So Janet, let me ask you this question. I am terrible with names. Now, what if I'm in a situation where there are no name tags and I forget this person's name? What is do I just be direct and say that I've forgotten their names, or what are some polite ways or maybe sneaky ways about going about this? How do I figure out this person's name without directly asking them?
Okay, there are a couple of situations here. First of all, you do not want to go through an entire conversation without ever saying someone's name. We, as human beings, we're hardwired to snap to attention when we hear our name. We are heavily invested in our name. We love to hear our name. So we want to take advantage of that to make others feel valued, understood, and heard. So let's say, first of all, let's take one scenario that you're, in fact, I have a story about this. I was at a trade show. I saw this man coming running in my direction. I didn't pay any attention to him because I did not know who he was until I realized he's got his eye on me. He is literally running towards me, and I have no idea who this guy is. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have to ask him his name. He said to me, my name's da-da-da. And we met at the Century Bank networking meeting last month. And then, oh yeah, I remembered. But he was proactive. He told me his name. He knew I probably would not remember his name. I will never forget that because I appreciated it so much. In the event that somebody does not do that, or they tell you their name and you forget it, you simply ask. Sometimes I might say something like, sometimes my computer freezes, sometimes it's my brain. Could you please tell me your name again? And people understand. Do you know how many people say to me, I have a hard time remembering names? It's a universal problem. Everybody understands. So if you must be direct. And again, on that point also, if someone says their name and you're not sure how to pronounce it, repeat it and ask, do I have this right? Repeat that name until you get it right. Again, because our name is so important to us. We don't want to be mispronouncing someone's name. But to answer your question, go back to the answer to your question, Robert. If you forget someone's name, simply, sometimes my computer freezes, sometimes it's my brain. My brain's like a sieve, something like that. Could you please tell me your name again?
And Janet, there's also this whole new etiquette around COVID-19,
Oh, yeah.
And so you could probably do a whole presentation on that alone. But in whether it's social settings or a networking event, how do you politely respond to someone if you feel uncomfortable? If like one of your slides referenced, shaking hands or something. What if someone maybe perhaps they just out of instinct, maybe perhaps they do it out of habit, but they reach out to shake your hand. You know, what are we doing in those situations?
It's, you know, I say courtesy does not dictate that we throw anybody under the COVID-19 bus, ourselves or those whom we love. So we do have to draw boundaries. And people are pretty understanding. If you actually, I met someone not too long ago and they extended their hand. I said, oh, COVID. Oh, he said, oh yeah. He withdrew his hand. If someone asks, for example, you're at work or you're with a group of people, but no, you're not with a group of people, but someone says, we're going out for drinks. Would you like to come with us? And you really don't want to go. You don't want to be in a bar or restaurant with other people. Offer the bad news, the bad news sandwich. I'd love to. However, I'm kind of COVID queasy. I'm a little nervous about this COVID thing. When COVID's history, I'll not only join you, I'll buy around for everybody. So it's the good news is appreciate the request. The bad news is you cannot comply, and then a piece of good news. Mm-hmm. If someone offers you food, it's the same thing. It looks delicious. Because of COVID, I'm only eating food from my own kitchen. When this thing passes, I'll bring it back and I'll be happy to dive in.
Great.
Yeah, so it's.
Let's see. Susan says she shook hands with someone recently and then used hand sanitizer right away.
Yeah, you can do that. It's all if you choose to. And it depends upon who you're meeting. Maybe there is someone and you would just as soon shake hands with them. You feel it's the proper thing to do. Have your hand sanitizer on hand. I think in most cases though, it's perfectly appropriate to decline with COVID. The other point about this is let's take an example. The example I just cited, would you like to go out for a drink with us? I'm COVID queasy. You want to put the burden on you. The fault is yours. You do not want to make them feel they made a mistake in asking you. I'm kind of COVID queasy. It may be silly, but I'm kind of COVID queasy. The fault is yours. The blame. I don't like to use the word fault, but I do. The fault is yours that you're not going. The burden's on you, not them.
So Janet, I think you had said that you were going to copy and paste the link to your complimentary conversation in the chat. Did you already do that?
No, I haven't done that because it doesn't copy and paste from the slide.
Okay. If you want, Janet, you can send me that information and I can include it in the follow-up email I'm going to send everyone.
That would be great. Thank you.
And that actually is a good point. I'm going to send a feedback survey out tomorrow morning. Please take 60 seconds and fill that out. Let me know what you thought of today's presentation and what you'd like to see for future speakers and topics. And we've hit 3 o'clock now, Janet, so this is probably a good time to depart. Did you have any last words you wanted to give to the group?
Well, the only last words are this. Sometimes in conversations, we get stuck. There isn't an answer to every single conversation dilemma. However, if we think about what can I say that's going to make the other person feel valued, understood, and heard, if you respond from that stance, you're not going to go off track. So what can I say that will make the other person feel valued, understood, and heard? And that's my final piece of advice. So I thank you, Robert, for the invitation to address all of you today. And thank you for participating, writing in the chat and answering and asking questions. It makes the whole experience, it makes it more fun for me. And the whole interactive nature of it, I think, makes it more interesting and just elevates the whole presentation rather than a monologue. I appreciate your participation. Thank you so much. And whatever your career goals are, I wish you all much success and a safe and happy holiday season.
Great. So Janet, if you can keep your slide up for the next 30 seconds, that would be appreciated. And again, thank you all so much. We'll see you next Monday. I will get you all an email within the next few days, letting you know of the remaining November schedule. And I hope to see many of you at those meetings. So thank you all again. And I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful week. And I'm sure I'll see some of you on Wednesday if you're 50 and over. Thanks so much and have a great day. Thanks, Janet.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Robert. Bye.
Bye-bye.